Silence! Dogood is a comic book that I have seen a lot of people talk about. I've seen a lot of really good things about this. And over doing my reviews, apparently, I've been getting the eyes of some other comic creators because not only did Mike Wheeler provide me with some free digital copies of comics to review, Sean Salter himself also DM'd me and said, hey, he wants to send me a copy of Silence Dogood. And I was like, sure, I'll take it. So apparently he's been watching my reviews and really liked it, and he wanted to know my thoughts on this. So I was absolutely on board with it. I 100%. I would love to just keep doing indie comic reviews and give my honest thoughts on it. So I told him, I said, hey, if I get it and I end up not liking it, I'm going to say I don't like it. But I assure you, I thoroughly enjoyed this comic, and I'm going to explain why through this with as little spoilers as possible. There will be some spoilers to it, so I'll try and keep it as vague as possible for some things. But I have a question for everyone. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you took Benjamin Franklin as a teenager into the year 2028? No? Me neither. But at least one person did, and that's Sean Salter. He did the artwork and the writing for this. And, the dude is just absolutely talented when it comes to both of these things. I think the writing is really solid on it. I think the artwork is just great. It really, the art style really makes me think of like a 90s cartoon. It really feels like that. It just has that vibe to it that it unmistakably, I could see these characters existing in the world of like Gargoyles, right? The Gargoyles series from the 90s. Stuff like that. It just looks so good. Just mwah. I love the art style. It's very unique compared to some other stuff that I've read. And it's also got a lot of real world historical stuff about Benjamin Franklin in here. I mean, the guy knows his history. Sean definitely knows his history about Benjamin Franklin as like a historical person, and then basically translates him into this character into this comic book, and throws him into an entirely out there idea. It sort of, when I first saw this, immediately my mind went to like the Abraham Lincoln vampire hunter thing, which is a totally ridiculous idea, but it works. It makes me wonder what's next. Martin Luther King of Wakanda? There's so many ideas that you can do. You take historical characters and you plant them into fictional settings, and while being respectful to like who the people are and who they were in history, I should say. Also being able to like tell an interesting story that could not be done if these characters were not based on the historical characters, because that's like the main appeal to this to me, is that you've got a real world person in history in a totally just out there setting and futuristic vibe to it. It's really cool. I never checked out the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter stuff, but similarly, I'm sure that's why people were intrigued about that, right? And, it's just a fun idea. Time travel and cyberpunk dystopias are not an original idea by any means, but the idea of planting a character from the past into this super high-tech world is very fun, right? It just goes to show that you don't have to have a totally original idea. You just have to have good ideas that are yours, planted in different things that have come before, right? It's a mixture of things that have come before that allows your works to be unique, even though they're not 100% original, right? No, nothing is 100% original. You can't do it nowadays. So if that's your hang up for not, making your story, don't let that be the case. Do it. Do what you want to do, and make it your own, right? But besides that, I do want to show, I did something a little bit different with this review. I ended up taking this and taking a little notebook and writing down all my notes on paper. I went to the park and just did this little video real quick, just showing me holding the book, showing you the front and back of it, and flipping through some of the pages and stuff like that. There's some really good concept art. Here's a little bit of a look of the artwork here. I don't want to show too much of it on screen because, again, This is a comic book you pay for, so I don't want to show everything that's available. But basically, I wanted to get away. I wanted to be in like a quiet, kind of peaceful spot just to read this, because this is a long comic. I don't know exactly how many pages it is, but there is quite a bit to it. In fact, it's basically 3 comics put into one volume, and you can read it. It's basically separated into chapters, and I've read all 3 of them, and I'm going to talk about all 3 of them, and go through that and basically give you my thoughts by the end of it as I was reading through it. So, with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with chapter 1 here. Oh, funny story though. As I was writing my notes on here, I got done with chapter 2. I sat the book down and I put the pencil on top of it. Now, I should have put it through the rings, because a gust of wind came through, blew the pencil right off the paper and fell between the cracks of 2 planks of wood right into the water. So I couldn't take any more notes. So I had to end up packing up and going back home to finish writing this review. But I was gonna do everything on paper. I was gonna do everything on paper and just go like super old school, because I wanted to get into the character of Benjamin Franklin, who of course did not have computers, believe it or not. So so I wanted to sort of get into the vibe of that, but of course Wind had other plans. But anyway, let's get into chapter 1. So immediately, there's a lot of real world history thrown into this. There's a lot. It's almost like a documentary in some sort of a way, up until the point where Benjamin Franklin gets taken into the future 250 years later. But the introduction for Benjamin Franklin as a character is it's interesting because it's based in reality, and then you get that time travel page where it's beautiful. The execution on the credits, and I'm sorry Sean, but I do have to show this page. This page is so good. It's a double spread. It looks so great, and as you can see on the papers that are flying off the desk, that's the credits, man. That's freaking saying it's presented by Turkey Robot Comics, created by Sean Salter and Alan Rhodes. Writers, artists, the editors, Charles Knopf and Ronald Christian. And then the historical consultant is Patrick Salter, which I'm assuming is either his brother, dad, uncle, something. And that's really cool. The way it was delivered feels straight out of like almost a movie sequence, like showing the credits at the beginning of the movie, kind of like how the Spider-Man Sam Raimi movie is just the first example that came to my head, where you got the spider webs going across and making the letters and all that kind of stuff. It felt like that, and I was like, I'm in for a good ride with this. I am in for a good time with this comic. Immediately right off the bat, I felt that. And the double page, there's multiple double page spreads in this comic, where it's just, you open it and it's just this big old display of art, and sometimes it's just a full page. Sometimes it's got different panels in like the corners and stuff like that, showing different moments in this space, in this wide shot, and it works so well. It works really good. I love trying to explore with that, and I've seen some things in this where I would like to kind of replicate some of the artistic paneling that I've seen in this in my stuff. I really want to get more creative with the paneling, and it's done very, very well. I already said it looks like a 90s cartoon, but I'll say it again. The villain's entrance is perfect, and I want to talk about the character designs here, because most of them are really great right off the bat. You've got the sexy girl, of course, a staple of any henchman trio or quadrio. You got to have the sexy girl, and then you've got this older sniper guy with like a robot eye. Perfect, no notes. And then of course you got the big dumb strong guy, and it's just every villain group needs to have a big dumb guy, a big strong dude who can just like threaten the heroes physically, and they have to use like their brains to get out of a situation, because you're not going to beat them head on in like a fist fight, right? You got to do something else. And it's the combination of all 3 of them that makes it more interesting, because you got the sniper, who of course is shooting from a distance, and then you got the hot babe with the lance that's able to do a little more technical combat up close, and then you just got the big dumb guy, Chevy, who's able to just be a constant threat with just his presence, right? and each of them very identifiable designs. It would be impossible to mix them up with any other characters. And I said this about a few reviews back about Puppet #1, that some of the characters sort of blended together a little bit with their designs. They didn't really stand out that much. And that's partially, I didn't really mention it in that review, but in that case, it's partially because the setting is like very much real life. There's not really anything supernatural up until the latter end of the comic there. But the character designs in this, because the world is sci-fi, because it's like cyberpunk, you can do a little more exaggeration with how the characters look, and that helps them stand out. Because a lot of the characters in this, because my complaint with Puppet was like pretty much almost all the characters in there were white with like dark hair, and that's what made it kind of, they kind of just didn't really stand out to me that much. But this also has a lot of white characters, but because of the setting, they have a lot of like different, like, you know, armor and outfit designs and all that kind of stuff. And plus their faces, like their facial structures and like their like I said, their clothing helps them stand out a great deal because of the setting of it, which I think is really good. And the heroes have a similar thing with that too. The heroes also have really good designs, really distinct personalities from each other, even some different dialogue. How they speak is different as well, I've noticed. The dialogue overall is pretty good. There are a few points where I felt like the characters said things that were a little repetitive or redundant. They just didn't really need to say it. And besides that, I think the dialogue overall was really good. It wasn't anything like, he's right behind me, isn't he? Like nothing like that. It didn't feel clunky or anything. Nothing really stood out to me as bad. But there is one character that I think the design is a little lacking of, and that's the main antagonist, Milo. You got this bald Lex Luthor looking guy, and he's just wearing just plain clothing. You know, like he's not really wearing anything that stands out. The only thing that makes him stand out is he's got these 2 dots on his head, and that's about it. I mean, there's not really anything else to him, really. Even in the virtual world, he just looks like a plain guy. And I can understand maybe he's trying to appeal, you want him to appear normal so that Benjamin Franklin has like a moment where he might trust him. You know what I mean? But at the same time, the villain henchmen are so obviously villainous that I would honestly just forego having a design that seems approachable for Milo. I would just go all in and make him look like the villain he's supposed to be. And maybe he does have another character design. Maybe this is just like how he looks in the first volume. This is him trying to be approachable. In reality, maybe he looks a lot worse off. And I have that theory because it's something I'm going to show towards the end. But it could be that, this body isn't even real. It could be a robot body. You know what I mean? Like, it could just be his acceptable appearance to the public and to Benjamin Franklin to try and win him over to his side. Of course, that ends up not working because, the story has to go the story has to go towards him joining with the good guys, right? And but it's done in a very interesting way. The entire time you've got like this sort of back and forth between this moment where Benjamin Franklin is jumping across rooftops and with the help of Maddie, which is this girl with a cybernetic arm and the hood, and she looks really cool. And you've got the dialogue of that time, and then you rewind to what's currently happening in the story, the events of him being taken into the future and this rebellion that's infiltrating to get him out of there. For whatever reason, the Empyrean, Empyrean is this corporation that Milo and the villain henchmen are a part of, are basically like Milo is the leader of it. They want Benjamin Franklin for something. I don't know what that is. If I'm just spitballing a random theory, I think Milo is Benjamin Franklin somehow. I think there's some sort of time thing where like that's him in the future, like he's older. They look somewhat similar in the face. Like, I'm not gonna say they look exactly the same, but that's my like tinfoil hat conspiracy theory that somehow Milo is Benjamin Franklin, because time travel stories love to do that kind of thing where the character is actually talking to their future evil version. and the main protagonist has to stop himself from becoming that character. Sometimes it's done really good, sometimes it's done bad. Look at the Lightyear movie. But anyways, the inner monologue that Benjamin Franklin has throughout this feels very intentional. Sometimes monologue in comics can feel sort of out of place or unwanted for me. Sometimes I get that idea, but a lot of times, like the stuff I've read with this in Silence Dogood, it fits the scene not only in like a narrative structure, but also it makes sense for him to, wax philosophical about, what it means to be alive, what it means to grow as a person. And it makes sense because there's this VR world where, everything is perfect, everything is great, you can do whatever you want, but there's no failure, there's no challenge to anything. It's all just given to you. And because of the lack of the ability to fail, the character of a person is unable to grow. And that's basically what Benjamin Franklin is saying throughout this entire comic. And it's a really good point. It makes sense for him to be such a thoughtful person because in real world history, Benjamin Franklin was a very prolific author, and it makes sense for him to bring this into this comic, this type of very philosophical, poetic almost dialogue to this. And it makes him really stand out from the rest of the characters, which are, obviously more cyberpunk, more, I guess, modern speaking, where you've got Benjamin Franklin speaking a lot more kind of, not necessarily older English like these and thous, but it's definitely, the vocabulary is definitely more old, more, I guess, obviously 1700s in its style. And I think it matches, obviously, the character very well, and it makes him stand out in this futuristic world. Besides that, for Chapter 1, I thought it was pretty good. It was a little exposition heavy in Chapter 1 and 2 from Milo talking to Ben, but it makes sense. Like, he's telling him a lot of things, but he's also, like, showing it at the same time with the VR stuff, but also it makes sense for him to be telling him this thing. Because, at the end of the day, I don't mind spoken exposition if it makes sense for the characters to be saying it to the other character. In Stranger Things, one of the things they critiqued about the last season was that there's too much of characters talking and explaining things, and that's because it didn't make sense for the time. It didn't make sense for the moment for them to be saying this, and then for the characters too, it didn't make sense for them to be explaining everything multiple times in detail, right? And part of that is because apparently, according to Matt Damon, Netflix requires shows to explain the plot multiple times because people are watching and not paying attention because they're on their phones while they're watching. God, I hate this world. Anyway, that was a little too extreme. I'm sorry. But yeah, the the idea with that is bad. Obviously, like that's terrible. That's terrible writing. Is just to be explaining stuff for the sake of explaining it to the audience. It makes sense for Milo to be explaining to Benjamin Franklin how the future world works because Ben Franklin doesn't know anything about the future. He's from 1700s. I don't know the exact date he was taken out of, but it's 1700s. And yeah, man. Yeah, it's it's absolutely crazy that Netflix does that. Anyway, I got distracted by it. But going into Chapter 2, a lot of this exposition is cut between awesome robot fighting action, which is always great. It's always really good. Chapter 2 also sort of implies a little more thought to the rebellion. There's this higher up dude who's sort of in the shadows talking and controlling things from remotely. And Colonel, I think his name was Colonel, or I think it was Colonel Lakely, and he looks like Samuel L. Jackson's Nick Fury. I'm just gonna say it. He looks like Nick Fury. He doesn't have the eye patch, but he certainly gives off that vibe. I read his voice as Samuel L. Jackson, and it just fit perfectly. But his presence, basically implies that there's a larger scale to the rebellion. And there's even a scene where, like, the president of the United States is giving a speech, and it sort of implies that Milo is in deep with the American government as well. So I mean, this is a pretty large scale thing that's happening here between the rebellion and the sitting government. It's very Star Warsy in a sense, because you've got this large rebellion faction, but also the sheer mass of the empire, right? The empire and its armies and ships and all that kind of stuff. A very similar vibe to that, and it just works. It sets them up immediately as the underdogs. You don't even have to do a whole lot of exploring as far as who these characters are. Immediately, you don't need that. Now that will get it done as the series goes, I'm sure, but it's not necessary for this first volume, and I'm glad he didn't do it, because it would make it feel bogged down and all that kind of stuff. It would be too much exposition, right? So it trusts the reader to be like, okay, this is a dystopian hellscape. These are the bad guys. These are the good guys. We'll get to the more complicated matters as we go. And it even sort of implies that Blakely and Milo know each other in a way. But that's just implied. It could totally like not be that deep of a relationship. It could be that they were like former friends or something. Or if this was a leftist comic, they would be lovers. But going into chapter 3, and again, I'm not going into too much detail because I don't want to spoil too much, but there's some really great action with some even bigger robots and some really great moments between the characters. There's a certain character gets injured, and I really thought that character was potentially going to die. And I'm not going to say if they do or if they don't. I'm just going to say that I was like, wow, this is actually pretty intense. This is pretty good. And what ends up happening is you get to see Ben start taking part in the action a little bit, right? And this is where I get to my one complaint. As far as like everything else, like I don't really have much to say other than like small nitpicks here and there that I don't think are worth even bringing up. But this is my one complaint, and I hate to even do this because I don't want to offend. I don't want to make this sound worse than it is. But Ben Franklin can kind of do almost anything. And it almost, not quite, but almost comes off a little Mary Sue-like. Because you've got this guy from the 1700s being brought into 2028 and shooting a futuristic gun perfectly aimed. And, I'm not a historian, so I don't know how good Benjamin Franklin was with the blicky. But to basically just give him a futuristic gun that characters were saying, no, don't give him a gun. He might just shoot himself. He doesn't know how to use it. And then he immediately knows how to use it. And not only that, but he's good at physical hand-to-hand combat, which, according to the history blurb at the end of this, turns out that Benjamin Franklin was like a colonel at some point in the military. And that's cool. But he wasn't a colonel at the age of 17 years old that he is in this book. So, again, it almost feels like he can do a little too much. It feels like this first volume, I really don't think he should have done much as far as action goes. But I'm fine if he says that could be a weak point. Shoot at that weak point and maybe it'll blow up. And then they do it and it blows up. I would be totally fine if he did that because he's not taking place in the action, because he's an intellectual person. He can take a step back and like analyze stuff, right? I would be totally fine if he did that. But the fact that he's the one taking the shot as well is, it's just I think a little too much, just a bit too much. Not not an offensive amount, not a terrible amount to where I'm like, oh. I'm seeing Ray Skywalker in here. No, I'm not saying that. But it definitely feels like he can do just a little too much right off the bat. But again, that's really my only complaint with like the writing of this. That's my only real complaint when it comes to this volume 1 here. Otherwise, really solid story. Really great introduction to this cyberpunk kind of world. There's not a huge exploration about like the world building. Like really, it just sort of just takes an existing concept and just says Benjamin Franklin is in here. And I'm sure more of it, like the state of the world and everything, would get more unraveled. Like I said, there's the president is involved somehow. The Empyrean corporation is a big player in this futuristic setting, and the concept of like VR worlds and stuff like that, and is it a good thing for people to be like connecting their brains to for days upon time, possibly forever? You know, would that be like a good alternative to living? And my thoughts on that: no, that's not a good idea. I watched Sword Art Online. But for real, it definitely is like, I mean, if you give your brain over to a corporation, especially if it's a corporation backed by the government, guess what? You are now owned by that corporation or government. Like, you know, like your entire life is basically downloaded to this VR world, this fake world. You would never catch me doing that, right? You know, you would never catch me trying to do something like that, because that's the easiest way to surrender all of your bodily autonomy and become a slave to the machine. You know what I mean? It is very dystopian, even if what is presented seems fine and great. The story does a really good job of having Benjamin Franklin kind of talk about that and explain why. Despite the fact that this is like mind-blowing for someone like him from his time period, where the most sophisticated technology was like the telegram, or what? Not the telegram. What is the Morse code? That's like the most advanced thing at the time, and now you throw him into this like completely like dream world, and he's not overwhelmed by it, because he's like, this is all fake anyway. This is pointless. And it takes someone like him, someone who lives in the real world, who's completely unplugged, to recognize that. And I think that's really cool. I think that's a really cool idea. It really does a good job with using the real life historical character or person of Benjamin Franklin, and taking him and plopping him into this futuristic setting and being like, actually, this is bad. it does a really good job with it, and I had a really fun time reading it. It was just a great comic, great experience. I really enjoyed it. I have a few more things I want to show here. One, the art for the thumbnail, I drew that. That's something I drew on E-Hero Andrew Rowland's YouTube channel. So I drew that on stream with him, just talking about a bunch of stuff with modern shows coming out, trailers and stuff like that, talking about a bunch of stuff that we liked watching growing up and things of the such. And I wanted to use that fan art for this, because it's a really cool idea, and it was fun to draw as well. But the website I'm showing here is Turkey Robot. This is where you're going to find all things Silence Dogood. Link to this will be in the description of the video, of course. And, just look at all this art, man. It's so good. There's so much just really great stuff here. Genuinely love this art style. It very much is a 90s cartoon. In my opinion, that's how I see it. It looks like a 90s cartoon brought to the comic pages. But something else I noticed on the link tree to Salty's Twitter page is a animation currently in development. I love this. I want this right now. Like, I want to watch this right now. I love this. I love, like, the art style is like, I don't know, it's very charming to me. Something about it is very charming to me. It's not too soft edge like a lot of cartoons now. It barely has like outlines at all, which I do like. I do love me some outlines. I do love me some thick outlines. You know my art style. But I do really like this. I like the style of it. I like the stuff. The characters seem to have different names than they do in the comics, is what I've noticed, because this guy looks like Nash from the comic, and this girl kind of looks like Maddie from the comic, but her name is Susie, and this guy's name is Clint Westwood. Reference. But yeah, and then this is the likely guy. This is the Samuel L. Jackson dude. But yeah, I mean, like, this looks really good. And this, going back to this is why I thought, I love this. I love these designs so much. I'm geeking. I'm geeking over these designs right now. But this is what I was saying when I was guessing that Milo's design is not his real design. It's like a front or like a robotic body, because you've got this old dude who kind of looks like Milo in this chair with like some life stuff hooked up to him, a life support keeping him alive maybe. He's got this robotic eye, or maybe it's just a monocle. This could be how he really looks. This could be how he really looks, and you just don't see it in volume 1. Maybe you see it in later volumes. But yeah, I absolutely love this right here. I want to see this. I really, really want to see this take place. It looks like such a fun idea. It's such a fun idea for a story, man. Just taking Benjamin freaking Franklin and dropping him into the 2028 cyberpunk dystopian world that we almost live in today. 2 more years and we will be living in this comic. I swear, it's talking about AI algorithms and stuff like that. We are here, man. We're cooked. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you want to watch more of my content, please subscribe to get notified for more. Read Little Miss Steel. Thank you so much for reading it for free on Global Comics. Of course, if you want a physical copy, I will be doing a crowdfund in February for the physical copy of Volume 1. So stay tuned for that. Follow me on Twitter and all that. Get you a copy of Silence! Do good today. And until next time, peace out.